Good evening all, and welcome. This video has been graciously sponsored by Studio. They were nice enough to send me these free headphones along with these super cool caps that I really like. If you'd like to get some of your very own, and perhaps have a look at their alternate caps to go along with it, feel free to check the link in the description. They have a special campaign that if you buy 2 or more products, you get 10% off, as well as free gift box wrapping, free and fast worldwide shipping, and an additional 15% discount using the promo code MORTIS15, which you'll find on screen and in the description. So, if you'd like some of your very own, check it out. I hope you're all comfortable, because it's time to let the darkness take control. An ex-boyfriend who I dated for a grand total of 3 weeks got really attached in those 3 weeks and told me he loved me after our first time. I told him I was flattered, but didn't reciprocate. I decided to break up with him soon afterwards because he was way too intense. I told him this, and then the abuse began. He began texting, calling, and Facebook messaging me incessantly. It varied wildly what he'd say, begging for me to come back over, and graphically detailing how he'd hope I would die, telling me that I'm loose and the like. I blocked his phone number and Facebook and Snapchat, and after he ignored my request to stop contacting me, he began messaging me through the accounts of mutual friends without their permission, I later found out, and leaving me about 10 voicemails every day. He got a hold of my work email, which I never gave him, and sent me long paragraphs in which he would bounce wildly between lamenting for his love for me, diagnosing me with various mental illnesses, which was everything from bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, MPD, and Asperger's syndrome. It was a new one each time. He dragged up the one time we did it into all of this, and telling me that I was broken, because why would I not want to be with him? I ended up getting a new email to use at work, because it turned out you couldn't block someone from emailing you, and once again sent a single line in a reply. It just said, "Stopped contacting me." He wasn't done there. He had previously been text messaging me, which he was blocked from doing. He found out that my MacBook can receive iMessages from his iPod Touch using my personal email address, which he did have. So here come the iMessages. Mostly DPs he found on 4chan, while calling me everything under the sun, and taking screenshots and posting my angry and distressed replies to his friend's group chat. Screenshots of this group chat then got sent to me. Thankfully, the mutual friend in the chat was actually sticking up for me. Everyone else was telling him to try and get back with me. I ended up turning off the iMessage function on my Mac altogether, so that he couldn't do it anymore. Again, I asked him to stop contacting me, this time threatening legal action to stop it, which he allegedly thought was hilarious. I ended up going to the police, and they gave him a call, telling him that they knew what he was doing, and that stalking charges would be pressed if he kept going. They told me to text him in front of them and tell him the call was coming. His reply made me angry beyond all reason. It said, "Stop contacting me. I've had my fun." I didn't reply under instructions from the police, but I went home and threw things around in anger for about 10 minutes. But on the bright side, I haven't heard from him since. I'm a guy, and I met this girl at work. She was okay, nothing I found special, but work is pretty boring, so I made friends with whoever was there. One day, she comes up to me and says, "Hey, so we're friends. I haven't been getting a lot of action lately. What if we messed around during our breaks every now and then? Would you be up for that? Just to blow off steam, nothing serious, but just some fun." I said of course. I wasn't dating anyone, and there'd be nothing more relaxing to do on a lunch break than that. We only messed around once or twice. Not all the way though, never all the way. Eventually, she stopped working at the store I was working at, and we didn't talk for a while. She hit me up and asked if I could come over and see her. I said yeah, but never did. I then got a girlfriend, and this other girl starts hitting me up on the regular. I actually took her to a coffee shop and broke the news with her that I didn't want to do anything like that anymore, and she seemed to understand. But then she started hitting me up way more often, wanting to hang out multiple times a week. I told her my girlfriend wouldn't be comfortable with that, but she persisted. I started ignoring her texts, and once I did, she started sending me essay-long texts about why I needed to see her. I ignored those, and then I got phone calls and multiple voicemails. I got a few every day. This went on for a few months. She would even send me texts saying she'd be at places in roughly 15 minutes to talk about our relationship and friendship, expecting me to show up. I was at a grocery store, and her friend were parked next to my car. I drove away, and they followed me for about 5 minutes. I think it was coincidence they saw my car, but I'm not sure. Then, she started showing up at my work and asking my co-workers about me. I was lucky enough to avoid her a few times, but she somehow figured out what time I was working, and showed up during the hours of my shift, where she knew I would be alone. Luckily, that one day happened to be when I was training a new guy, and I saw her through the window, before she saw me, and I hid in the back. I hid back there for about an hour, but she was sitting at the diner tables waiting for me. Finally, I had the security guard for our plaza come by and kick her out. After that, the voicemails started getting less and less frequent, and after years, finally stopped. I've had a stalker for the past 3 years, who I still haven't been able to discover. It started out with getting really strange text messages, stating that they were in love with me, but then they would change to saying they'd hate me and would want to see me die, that I broke their heart. I still couldn't think of who this person could be, and it got increasingly worse. They broke into my house, leaving the door wide open. I received a text from them, describing the inside of my room. I then filed a police report, but they couldn't track the number because it belonged to a fake texting app that gives you a number, and they couldn't track the device to the app. Then, it stopped for a few months. Later, I received more texts. I couldn't remember word for word what they are. And then, I assume, they followed me to my best friend's house. We were all hanging out, and it was just her friends and me, and we received text messages stating what the inside of the house looked like. We flipped out, but honestly there was nothing we could do. The police couldn't track this person. Then it stopped. I know they started stalking this other girl who was friends with my girlfriend. I had problems with that girl, but they stalked her for about a year. I just now found out about it. She filed a police report as well, but nothing could be found. He apparently pretended to be me though for a while. She thought I was her stalker. Now it started up again, but it's just even more creepier. They sent me a mask in the mail on Halloween, texting me, "I hope you like your present, beautiful." I tracked the package and nothing came up. Now they're texting me that I will never find them. They are traceless. Then texting my girlfriend, I'm a girl too by the way, my location and where I am. what I'm wearing on certain days, and then they made a fake email address pretending to be my new girlfriend asking to meet up. There's a lot more, but I'm frightened and I don't know what to do. This happened to me about 20 years ago, and back then, when you figured out you were gay, it was very tough. I was about 14 at the time, and like most kids, didn't have an interest in girls, but as puberty was starting to hit, I realized that my lack of interest in girls was still there, and I was far more interested in the same sex. This was a huge concern for me. My family was super Christian. I mean Christians on steroids. They were very friendly with the pastors, and they were openly homophobic, and would talk about how ungodly it was. This terrified me. I didn't know who to confide in, and after meeting a boy at camp, we started sending each other letters. We met up the following year in camp, and we got talking properly, after a year of getting to know each other better through writings. His name was Nathaniel. He, like me, was also gay, and I've got to admit, he was a very attractive young man. It's a good thing that we shared the same bunk rooms, and in the middle of the night, we would sneak off into the forest and just chat and talk. Camp went by far too quickly, but some of our parting words that we should be strong, and that we should try and be honest with our parents. We both set ourselves deadlines, that by the time we're 18 and go off to college, we should be straight with them, because at the very least, if they don't accept us, we can leave and not look back. Now, I'm a very emotional guy, and I find it very hard to keep secrets. I loved my family, and I didn't want to have to lie to them. I didn't want to have to feel like I couldn't be myself around them, and it was slowly eating up at me. During the course of the school year, my letters with Nathaniel became increasingly less frequent. He'd send them. Sometimes he'd send more than one, maybe 2 or 3 or 4, and I just couldn't be bothered to reply. I don't know what it was. Perhaps it was the additional schoolwork. Perhaps it was me being lazy, always telling myself that I would do it the next day and never doing it. And when they started piling up, it became a problem. One rainy afternoon, I decided it was time to read what they said. The first was your standard letter. The second was very much the same, with a hint of concern. The third was when things started to get creepy. He started saying he was very angry, that I wasn't telling him what was going on in my life, and that I wasn't being a good friend. But when we got to the fourth, he was openly threatening me, saying that if I didn't send him a letter back within a week, the next letter to my house would be to my parents, with him forwarding all the letters he had kept that I sent him, with me confessing that I was gay, and that he wasn't kidding. This really started to panic me. What kind of friend could you be to threaten someone like that? I instantly wrote back and told him that I was sorry, and that I really didn't want things to end up this way, and that I really valued our friendship, and that I was just busy with school. He didn't reply for about 2 weeks, so I assumed that he was annoyed at me. But I did get a reply back in about a month, with him saying that all was forgiven, but to try and keep it to the schedule that we had established, which was 1 letter every other week. I always got nervous opening them. It even got to the point that whenever I'd see we had mail, I'd run out to check. I knew his writing, and I wanted to make sure that he hadn't sent anything to my parents. I was feeling very vulnerable and scared. It was about this time that I met Brad, a kid in our school. I knew him vaguely from before, and it was at someone's house party where we started talking. I got vibes that he liked me, and that he was gay as well, and I definitely liked him. I risked it at the party, and when I was sure no one was looking, I gave him a little peck on the mouth, and waited to either see a smile or for my face to get smacked. Fortunately, he smiled, winked at me, and we both went out back to his car to carry on what we had started. Safe to say, our relationship kept going from strength to strength. Within 3 months, I was convinced that I was in love. He was a terrific guy. And it was easy. I'd always just say I was going out with my buddy, and my parents didn't have any trouble with me coming home late. It was great. I thought this would be so much more difficult if I was straight, and laughed at myself for being so lucky. Something that struck me was that when he introduced me to his parents, he straight up introduced me as his boyfriend, and his parents were the coolest, most laid back, and nicest parents I'd ever met. They were so supportive of his son being gay, and I wished that on my family. However, as my relationship was going great, my letter progress was slowing down. I'd never mentioned to Nathaniel that I had a boyfriend, because I liked him. He'd never tell me about any guys that he'd met, or anyone that he were remotely interested in. And part of me thought that if I told him, he might explode and tell my parents. It was only a few months away from camp, so I decided it would be best to let him know then, in person, that I had met someone, and then see his reaction, which would hopefully give me enough time to deal with his fury, if any, and so that my parents wouldn't find out. The months came and went, and it was time for me to go back to camp. He confirmed in his letters that he would be there. Part of me was worried that he knew something was up and wouldn't show, but I was so glad to see his face when I went. We had a really fun time, and I kept putting it off as it was a lot of fun hanging out together. Sometimes when we'd sit next to each other, he'd start rubbing my leg. Sometimes he'd put his hand a bit too close to my private area, and I'd just try and move it down, gently, and pretend like it was nothing. I had the feeling that he was into me now, and having been in a relationship for the past few months, I was picking up on all the subtle cues, well, sometimes not so subtle cues, that he was dropping at me. And that's why I was terrified of having to tell him the news, that I wasn't interested, and that I had met someone, but still wanted to be friends. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I knew this was going to collapse. I left it until we had 3 days left of camp, and took him aside one evening, and we went out into the forest just to have a chat like old times. We sat there on a tree, and I was complaining to him about the same old school, parents, and not being able to tell anyone. Then I just casually dropped it into conversation. Oh yeah, I hate not being able to tell anyone about my boyfriend. That's when he smiled. He gave me a very chuffed look. Boyfriend? He said. Then he started stroking my arm. You haven't even asked me out yet. But of course I'll be your boyfriend. Took you long enough to ask. You think 2 years worth of letters, and he'd have asked me by now. And he started laughing. That's when my stomach dropped. If I told him, that would be it. He would be crushed, and he would go home in fury and send those letters. I was torn. I didn't know what to do. So that evening I pretended that we were together. I really was getting myself into a complicated mess, and he wanted to kiss. Not wanting to ruin my chance of a happy relationship back home, I gave him a little peck and told him that there would be more for him next time. He insisted we come out the next day, back into the forest in the evening, and talk. This time he wanted to do a bit more kissing, But I told him that I wasn't ready and tried giving off all these excuses. It was our last day, and he insisted that he wanted to give me something special to remember me by until next time. He wanted to give me a hand job. Now, I really wasn't comfortable. I hadn't done anything with my own boyfriend yet, let alone with Nathaniel, and told him that I wasn't ready and that it was off limits. That's when he started grilling me. He was telling me that most guys would be ecstatic at the opportunity, and that I was just flat out rejecting him, my boyfriend. He got furious. He said that something was up and started grilling and poking questions, until finally I exploded and told him that I had a boyfriend back home and that I didn't want to be with him. Bad move. He didn't react the way I thought. He just looked at me, jumped down off the tree, and left. I tried talking to him when we got back to the bunkhouse, but he refused to say a word. He avoided me all morning, and then I was picked up and didn't see him again. That was it. No letters in the mail. I checked for months. He never sent anything to my parents. And I thought everything in my life was going great, until I moved to college 2 years later. I did end up fulfilling my pact, and told my parents that I was gay. I was surprised how quick they were to accept me. I was genuinely surprised my parents didn't kick me out there and then. My mother was super quick and happy to accept me, and she looked at me and said, "Son, I've always known." She said that my dad had always known as well, and he just laughed and said, "You think you can keep a secret from your old man? Wrong." It was so relieving, and it made me feel stupid for not telling them years before, and I spilled the beans on my boyfriend and everything. I should mention at this point that me and Brad had broken up. We were going to different colleges, and it just didn't make sense, and we parted as good friends. I was accepted at a fairly prestigious institution that I worked my arse off to get to, and you'll never guess who made it to the exact same place. That's right, Nathaniel. He was studying a completely different course to me, and was surprisingly amicable the first time I saw him. We had a catch-up, and he said to let bygones be bygones. That quickly went out the window though. Just as we were leaving from our little chat and coffee, he put his hand on my leg and said that he'd been thinking about me an awful lot, and asked if I'd been thinking about him. I told him yes, but not in that way, and moved his hand back towards his own leg, and then promptly left. I didn't see him again after that. That's because he was seeing me from the shadows. He would stalk me. He would post letters through my letterbox about how much he hated me, how I ruined his life, and how he wanted me dead. He had a little Polaroid camera, and he'd take these pictures of me walking around campus, sitting in class, eating lunch, and would send them with the letters, saying that he knew what I was doing, he knew where I lived, and that if he wanted me dead, he could arrange it. This was when things were starting to get creepy. I wanted to confront him face to face now. I wanted him to know that it wasn't cool to be stalking and harassing someone, even though we had been friends at one point, and that he should just leave me the hell alone and never speak to me again. I got one of his letters and wrote on the back, "If you ever contact me again, I will call the police," and left it in my letterbox to see if he would find it when he next shoved one in. He ignored the bait, didn't even take it, and the letters kept on coming. The Polaroids, the letters, it became part of my daily routine. I wouldn't even read them anymore, although I would see which pictures he'd taken of me. I'd just toss them up and throw them in the bin. It took me a few weeks before I plucked up the courage to tell campus security, and after doing some checks, They told me that there was no student by that name in this institution. What? Had he given me a fake name? It took me weeks to find out that he was never even accepted at the college. He was working at a coffee store about 10 minutes down the road and happened to have moved to this city recently. How convenient. I confronted him at his work and he seemed super embarrassed as he didn't have control here, and I started yelling at him. I ended up getting kicked out, but it was worth it. And I told him to meet me after his shift at my house, seeing as he knew where I lived, to talk about this properly. But don't think I invited him without making sure that I'd be safe on my home turf. No. I had 4 of my biggest, butchest friends be in the room next door, and I gave them a signal if anything bad were to happen for them to jump in. He showed up, and we had a semi-civilized conversation. Me telling him that he was being really creepy, and him just trying to get me to realize how much he loved me, and how much he needed me in his life. I wasn't having any of it, and told him that it was the last time I ever wanted to see him, and if he showed his face around here again, I'd show the police the letters and the pictures and get him done for stalking. That's when I gave my friends the signal. And just as he was leaving my room, they took a picture of him on a Polaroid. And I said, I'm going to be keeping this for future reference, and if I ever see you or get anything from you again, I will be sending this to the police, and you will regret it. Safe to say, I never got anything from him again. I did, however, receive a phone call many years later that was just breathing down the line. I'm not sure if it was him or not, or just some creepy prank caller, and I don't think I want to find out. I'm happy now. I'm married, have a husband, and 2 great kids, and have the best life I could ever imagine. He's still out there though. I just hope he never decided to stalk anybody else. I had a friend in a primary school I moved from. But anyway, he was obsessive over me. I wasn't allowed to have any other friends because of him. This broke whatever friendship we had. Then other bad things started happening to me from other people. I didn't know he was manipulating them to hurt me in any way. So I left that school, and he left too, because my godbrother, he's a badass by the way, beat the crap out of him until he left. This was grade 2. Year 7 at my high school, I met him again and thought he'd changed, but he manipulated his friends to be friends with me. I didn't notice until the year after when I stopped being friends with him again, because he was leading a group of students taking and selling laptops from other students. He started getting the worst people from the school to hurt me badly, so I went to my only other friend for help, and he taught me how to fight, starting with knocking people out, because it got to a point where he was getting people to attempt to stab me. Then I left the school, because they supported everyone under this guy. At my newer school, my YouTube channel got popular, and I was gaming more frequently. He looked for a long time to find everyone I played with on Skype, and convinced many of them to commit suicide. I don't know how. Luckily enough, my godbrother and his stepbrother went to this school and had a pretty big fight with a lot of people working for him. And ever since then, it stopped. I dated a guy and broke up with him. On the first week or so, it seemed like any teen post-breakup. He'd text me, "Baby, please, I can't live without you. Baby, you're my number one and only." Ha! Cheater. And would talk about all of that stuff. Okay, whatever. Block number, block Facebook, done. Well, he started another Facebook account and started texting me on his sister's phone. I blocked them. And here's where it gets creepy. That night I hear a truck with a bad muffler playing Aerosmith. I couldn't see it since it was night, but the truck was black, and I'm 90% sure he'd park in the spot in front of my house and sit there for a while. The adults in the house just chalked it up to gang activity, not a creepy ex. He showed up at my school dance with a girl and just stood in the corner and watched me all night. At one point it got so bad, I had my mother go over to his house in order to put a stop to it. My mother bought her gun, of course, but his mother beat his ass for 1, cheating, 2, disrespecting a lady, and 3, being an ass. It stopped almost immediately. I get a text from him whenever he's newly single. It got so bad, but I actually had cousins offering to take care of him. This dude wasn't my boyfriend, but he was my best friend since age 14. Fast forward to age 18, 2012, and I found out that I'm gay, and came out to him and only him. But I think he wanted to date me, and thought he could change me. I never dated any girl, mostly because I didn't get out of the house at all, only for important appointments because of my depression. There was this girl who I had a crush on, and I told him about it, and then he told me she wasn't good enough and started talking crap. I told him to calm down. I didn't even know her name, and I'm also afraid of dating girls, since I just recently found out and I don't really know what to do, since everyone else I know is homophobic, including my own parents. Many times he tried to kiss me, but I would always push him away. And one day he kissed me, and I had no way to stop it. I got out of his car, got mad at him, and told him there was no way we would ever be together, since I'm not attracted to him in that way. He just said, "It's a phase. I've known you your whole life. You've always dated guys. Why didn't you date me then?" Then we had a conversation. Even though I dated guys, it never worked out. Once the dude kisses me or tried to do anything else, I'd always break it off, and he already knew that. How stupid was I not knowing I was gay? Anyway, fast forward 2 or 3 years. I hadn't seen him since I came out to him, and we had a talk on the phone. During that time, I'd spoken to 4 girls and I'd met them on Facebook, and they always kept flirting with me. But since I didn't know them, I always tell them, "I'm sorry, I'm not gay." Then I somehow found some similarities between them. I cross-checked it and found out they were all probably the same person. I didn't think of it yet, but he started telling me things that I told one of the girls and started to cross-check them with his account. And what do you know? It was him. Now, I wasn't 100% sure it was him, so I started to test him in a course over 2 months, so I wouldn't let him know I knew it was him, and somehow my gut was telling me that it was. Now, I told him that I knew about it, and he shouldn't have done that, and he got mad, and I got mad, and we fell apart. Fast forward to 2015, September. I get creepy calls, funny calls, like 7 days. I was called all the most horrible things under the sun, that I was going to go to hell and burn forever. And I knew the only person it could have been was him, because he's the only one I'd ever told. I'd keep seeing him everywhere for a while after that, staring at me creepily, but he never talked to me, and whenever I opened my mail, I'd find dead flowers or dead flies or dead bees. I didn't know how he would collect them. My mum became too scared since we lived together, and I kept hearing someone knocking on my bedroom windows. I called the cops twice, but they didn't find anyone, and asked me questions on who I think might it be, and I didn't tell them who it might be, since I took into consideration that he was my friend. Sometimes I see him with a sad face, and one day he came up to me and said something like, "I've been here every day and haven't seen you walk out the house. Is everything okay?" I told him what was up. I know I'm stupid for still talking to him, although he always did nice things whenever I saw him afterwards, and it made me feel like I needed him in my life. I was probably brainwashed. Things then started to become obsessive, and he even hit me twice, on purpose. For example, I said, "By the way, thanks for the dead bees." He looked at me weird and somehow moved his hands and slapped me. I slapped him back, but we laughed about it. The reason I talked to him is because he was my only friend, and somehow I felt the need to have a friend. Obviously, my self-esteem was really low. He kept calling me for literal hours every day, and when I say literal, I mean I didn't know whether he sleeps or not, but I turned my phone off all night, and when I'd wake up, there'd be a bunch of messages. "Where are you? I'm worried, blah blah blah." I got scared since my mother was out of town for a couple of months, and one day I woke up and found him in my house making breakfast. He even cleaned the house. It was nice that he did that, but he did break the window to get in, although he called someone to fix it later that day. I don't know what it is though. It seems like he didn't know what he was doing was wrong, and he kept hinting that we were going to be together, and sometimes even threatened to tell my mum about me being gay. And you know what? I think my mum would actually want me to marry him, especially since I can't tell her everything he'd done. He knows I can't tell her, and he's using that to his advantage. I still didn't call the cops. I still didn't tell anyone. But I did have a breakdown. I started to scream and tell him that he's ruining my life. The last month, he sent me a handwritten letter telling me he was sorry and didn't know what he was doing. He said he went to the psychologist, and if I ever still wanted to talk to him, that he will send me an email next year if he gets better. And the letter was more detailed, and I believe something ticked off in his brain, like the way I became crazy. It's all very convoluted and strange. I'm just glad it's over. I've had 2 stalkers. Compared to some other stories, they may pale in comparison. But the first one was when my ex-boyfriend cheated on me with a girl he worked with, over a period of about 5 months into our relationship. Like an idiot, I gave him another chance, and the other girl didn't like that at all, and started turning up when we would go out, waiting outside the cinema screens for the whole time we would be in a movie, and attempting to talk to me. When that didn't work, she and her friends started messaging and harassing me and my friends and family on social media. This went on for over a year, and it was a nightmare. Now, I am out of that relationship, and I suspect he was still having contact with her, which is why it went on for so long, but I will never have proof. The second, coincidentally, was my ex-boyfriend when I left him. He didn't take it well and contacted me somehow every day for 3 weeks. Text, Instagram, turned up at my house, texted my mum, Facebook, running past my house. I promptly blocked him on everywhere, and when he realized he couldn't contact me, he turned up more, especially to the house. In the beginning it was after work before my mum came home, and it took a week or so for him to realize that I could ignore him until mum came home and he couldn't get to me. After that, he started turning up before work, and after my mum had left, parking his car at the other end of the street and waiting for me to answer. I had to, because eventually I had to go to work, but over about a month and a half, he got that I wasn't going to take him back, and finally left me alone. I've only seen him properly once since, and the way he looked at me was terrifying, so angry, like he wanted to throttle me with something. When I was in my final 2 years of high school, I would get tutored for maths by a guy we will call Brian. Brian was at least 65 years old and worked for a tutoring centre. I would see him 2 afternoons a week for 45 minutes each time. He seemed like a very lonely guy, never married, no kids, and from what I could tell, had very little friends, and I felt a bit sorry for him. I was always really nice to Brian, and to avoid having to do maths work, I would just ask him questions and try to start a conversation. All was well when I finished high school, and that was that. About 1 year later, my best friend's younger brother got tutored by Brian as well, and one day, when I dropped my friend's brother off, I said, "Say hi to Brian from me," as he got out the car. About a week later, I received a letter in the mail from Brian. It was saying how he really liked me, and that he was now tutoring Ben, and was excited when mentioned to say hi. He took this the wrong way, and in the letter basically confessed the feelings he had for me, and was so glad I felt the same way. He said some very creepy things in the letter, about how I looked good in my uniform, and always wanted to tell me but didn't want to get in trouble. I told my parents about the letter, and they approached the tutoring center and informed the owners. He ended up getting fired for the letter, and also for accessing personal information of clients for him to send the letter out. About a week later, I started receiving flowers at my doorstep, and they would be followed up with text messages to my mobile number saying, "Hope you like the flowers," and "Give me a call if you want to get a coffee." My parents took all of this to the police, who got in contact with Brian, and he was cautioned, and I'd never heard from him since. I had a guy from a video game find my address, send me letters and presents regularly. I remember this one line that I don't think I'll ever forget. "You appear to have blocked me on your phone. You've blocked me on game. You aren't using your Skype or haven't logged on as far as I can tell since Sunday, and you won't reply to my friends when they whisper you. So I thought this would be a better way to contact you." We dated for a Tuesday. I still don't know what emails he's talking about, because I'm fairly sure he hacked it anyway. I didn't read the rest of the letters after that. It was all handwritten as per usual, and roughly 5 pages. Every time I renamed a character and moved servers in the game, he'd always find me within a couple of minutes. I still don't know how. And I had to change everything online multiple times so that he couldn't find me. Sometimes it worked. It got really obsessive though once he thought he loved me, but thought I was lying when I said I didn't love him, regardless of how many times I wasn't interested with him, and I loved my boyfriend. I used to say, "I do love you, the same part of you at least," and ended up ruining my relationship, reputation, and lost a lot of friends, and I learnt a lot about my real friends. It changed me as a person. I'm so jaded now. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad that there's no one behind you right now. Right? If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. Also, if you're new here, why not subscribe and press the little bell icon to be updated every time I post, as I do post every night. If there's a story that you would like shared on Mortis Media, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my Reddit. Either are fine. Just be sure to include plenty of description, paragraphing and punctuation. Because let's face it, for the most part you guys like the longer stories, so why write a 1-paragraph story? But anyway, for now guys, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.